property, I think more than compensate for your concerns about, will the sign be visible? How do you drive the people out there? I think the property, the city, all that will really sell itself. And I think at the end of the day, that's what you really want. That's the big win for you, I think. I'd also point out that as a site development sign, by code, it can be up there for a year. And I think that this is so out of step with what the code is that it really would be problematic.
But,
So-
and with all due respect, I did put a limitation on the number of days. I think we've just requested another 60 days or something.
When did the signs go up? Do you know how long it's been?
That exact date.
Approximately.
They've been up there for 3 weeks, give or take a few days.
Other comments, questions?
Chairman, just for clarification, they did on their temporary sign permit application request that the sign be through February 1st, 2017.
The
Would-
17,
We presume 18. I don't see.
I mean, 2018, excuse me. So we're talking about 2 months. Well, actually, about 1 month.
right.
Okay.
I have one question.
Yep.
How does this fit in with the other variances we have for this kind of business? Do we have other variances that reach this point?
The shopping center has not come for conceptual review by the commission,
Putting a,
and I don't believe that has the plat been completed?
it has not.
Yeah, so literally nothing has come forward to the commission or council on this development, other than the conceptual design plan for the O'Reillys. And if I recall, there were no variances required for the O'Reillys.
I don't think so either.
We've had a pre-development meeting.
Thus far, okay. And that, to be clear, that's part of the property here, right? Or no?
Get that?
It's part of the property. It's part of the same property, the O'Reillys.
No, it is not.
It's not. It's the one next door.
It was, they
s-
have
Let me,
replatted
for
their
clarification,
acre.
they have sold that property to O'Reillys, but it hasn't been platted yet to divide those two lots.
So right now, though, it's one lot.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's my understanding that, I think the plat's been done.
We approved the plat for O'Reilly's, I thought.
I don't think so. I think we've only done the conceptual.
No?
Okay.
I'd have to go back and look. I don't know. It's either two, I don't know. I don't believe that because I just asked and you said the plating was not completed yet.
Not on our development, is not, it is completed on the O'Reillys. It's a total of approximately 3.5 acres. O'Reilly has one, and we have 2.5.
Okay.
Okay.
I think we did see the plot because they had the drainage on it.
Lots of stuff going
Not
on the
for- not for
O'Reillys.
this
plat.
development.
For the O'Reillys.
For the O'Reillys, potentially, I don't recall.
Correct, okay.
But just looking at it, the elevation of those lots should be similar.
Yeah, it's one plan.
Yeah. So that's why I was wondering if O'Reilly didn't ask for any variances, why do we have such large variances for this property?
Mr. Chair, what you said and what Mr. Joe says, I agree. I mean, we need to follow what we've done, and I know that area very well, and it is prime location. It's going to be very visible. I know whoever gets the fortunate to be out there and do business out there is going to benefit from the large community residents that are out there. And I know signage is important, but we do want to make sure that we follow the code. And to the best, I mean, certain variances, sure, but when it's significant, that could be concerning. That is near the scenic loop area, and we want to respect the town of Helotes, and we want to make sure that we continue with the mindset that this commission and our city council has done as far as making sure that we are conscious of keeping the character of Helotes intact as much as we can.
Well, I think at this point, and thank you for your comments, let me just ask if we can get a motion, we could talk about the motion and move forward.
One other brief comment.
Go ahead.
In terms of variances, though, I think I'm okay with, and speaking for myself, if there is a grade issue in the sign, and I think the code kind of alludes to that in some of the other signs, that if there's a grade issue, they can go a little higher to account for the visibility issue regarding that. And in terms of the overall height of the sign, taken for average grade if it's not visible from the street because of the fall off. But again, I think that there's just beyond that, there's a little bit too much here.
So would somebody care to make a motion?
So, Mr. Chair, in the motion,
So this is a recommendation, so we'd be recommending approval or disapproval of what has been submitted. And then council, whatever we do, council next week it goes to council to make the final, determination.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion.
Go ahead.
I'll recommend approval on the request by Texas Premier Capital for a site development sign, including the variance of increased sign height, but disapproving the other requests of size and number of signs and lighting pursuant to Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 66, signs.
There a second on the motion?
Can you repeat that?
The motion is to recommend approval of the request as submitted only so far as it goes to allowing for the height, the excessive height, disapproving the other variance requests as they relate to size, number, lighting, size, number, and lighting.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion. So Jeff, do you want to speak to the motion at all?
Just want to reiterate what everybody else has said, is just, even though it is for a shortened amount of time, we just need to kind of conform to what is already laid out in our city ordinances.
Joe, anything?
Well, I'm a little hesitant, but I think that if we address the sign thing, that it'll probably not be too far out of sync with what we're doing for other businesses. So I feel a little concerned, but I think it'll probably fit.
Anyone else?
My question is, just to be clear, so that what we would approve is allowing the size of the sign, and code is maximum is 8 feet tall, but this is going to be 13 feet tall. So we're going to allow 5 feet more signage on this.
Correct, that's what the proposal is,
For height, not square feet.
for height.
Signage or anything else.
Mr. Chairman, just to review, he was saying that give them height, bring the square footage down to code.
Everything else to code.
Yeah, okay, everything else to code.
This is a temporary sign, or is this?
This is as requested by the applicant through essentially till February. He said February. Okay, the only thing I would add is, given the way this discussion has gone and the proposal and the signs went up first without this, you might want to be very careful going forward, especially with the tenants, make sure they know what their responsibilities are, so forth, regarding signage, get ahead of it. So the motion is to recommend approval. Well, let me say it this way. The motion is regarding the request by Texas Premier Capital for site development signage for a proposed retail shopping center at 13523 Bandera Road, recommending approval of the excessive height, which is 13 feet, but recommending disapproval of the other aspects of the variance request, which include lighting, number of signs, and sign size. So all in favor of that motion, please signal aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, so what was that?
I oppose.
Opposed, sorry, thank you. So the motion is approved, which is the recommendation that will go to council next week. They'll have our recommendation, but council, being council, can change it. Not that our council ever does anything different than what this body recommends, but anyway, January 11th. Thank you for coming out. I appreciate your participation in this discussion. 1, 2, 3. So it was 4 to 1. Because I didn't vote. All right. Number 10 tonight is discussion and action on a request by Facility Solutions Group for approval of a single business use monument sign pursuant to Municipal Code of Ordinances for signs for the Kentucky Fried Chicken located near the intersections of Cedar Trail and State Highway 16. Anyone representing them tonight? That's if we have questions. City Administrator, any discussion, comments on this?
Yes, staff has reviewed the proposed monument sign for KFC. The proposal does, and if you look on the dais, they amended their proposal. It does include an 18-inch monument base. It is within the 8-foot max, and it is within the square footage requirements. They did add in that they would provide landscaping 2 feet around the base of the sign, and that would be Texas native landscaping in compliance with our code. The only thing that is not included on the sign that I would recommend to the commission would be the street address needs to be placed on the base of the monument sign. And the other comment I have is because we had, and I wouldn't normally bring this up, but because we had so many issues over the KFC wall signage before, whether the design of the monument sign, the red, complies, in the commission's opinion, with code. But everything else technically complies with code on the sign.
Okay, and did you recommended the address on the base? Did you say that?
Yes, that's the only thing that was not included in the packet, that the address be placed on the base.
Right.
Mr. Chair,
Open it up for discussion. Yeah, Jeff?
just a quick question, Rick. So what's on the application here as far as the dimensions and height are incorrect?
The original submittal had two different, one said 8 or 10 feet, but then the original graphic said 80 square feet, so we had them amend it to where they were clear that it was 8 feet high by 10 feet wide. So 80 square feet. The maximum is 84 square feet, so it does comply.
And you were saying you're concerned about the red on the sign?
No, sir, I am personally not concerned about the red of the sign. I'm just suggesting, I don't want somebody to think I'm ignoring the elephant in the room. I mean, y'all may have design concerns about this monument sign. But, I mean, this is a typical KFC logo.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ron.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, and it is internally lit, right?
yes.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, is it possible with our friend from the community or Rick have, to remind us the sign that we did approve for the exterior of the building? Wasn't it modified? Was the color scheme red? I remember there was stripes or there was something there, but we changed something to make a modification and we found a happy compromise.
Yes.
Can we get that reminder?
We've got that one. We've got that one, yeah. He's asking about the building.
Yeah,
Signage on the building. Go ahead, Rick.
I could look back, it would be included in the agenda packet, but I don't recall what month. Are you the sign contractor for the other sign as well?
Yes, sir. My name is Nick Harris. I'm with Facility Solutions Group. And yes, we will be the sign installers for this particular project. Originally, the architect, Charles Pope, came in with the easements, the setbacks, the building,
Right.
all that criteria. And we had to come back in to assist into what can we fit into the code. So we went back and we redesigned the wall signage. So now it's going to be 3 non-illuminated panels.
Yeah, and that's not up for
Yeah.
discussion. My question was, do you remember what month that was, so I can pull
Oh.
up the packet?
Good question. I would say it was, I know it was before Thanksgiving.
Try October.
October.
Yeah. I say October.
My recollection, I could be off on this, but that we were, worked with them on the size of the sign more than the color.
And we took away the wording, let me rephrase, back on the frontage of the building, we went with the smallest KFC set of channel letters. There was some concerns about the color concept that he originally designed to encompass the whole building, make it look like a giant chicken box.
Right.
So I went back to where part of that awning that goes above the front door had to incorporate at least one small section of the red and white banding. What we did as a sign installer said, well, can we go in with just the logo of the Colonel's face and take away the wording and reduce that logo to fit with the KFC? And that's what my recollection went back to the council for final approval, and there's some other issues, but we resolved it to where we would be within the allowable linear footage for the drive-through, canopy, the clearance bar, and then the
Right.
wall signs. And this particular portion of that project was accidentally omitted from the very get-go. So that's why we're here today, to finalize the final part of this package, which is the monument. And again, yes, there was some confusion on the submittal, because we had, forgive me, my graphic designers have been on vacation for 2 weeks. I was trying to get hold of Charles Pope, the architect, to say, hey, can I have your set of landscape plans that are necessary when he submits for his plat and his building permit? I just received it like around 6:30 this afternoon, but I'll be glad to forward that to Rick tomorrow. But basically, we will comply with the overall height. We'll be at 80 square feet, including the base. That was one of the things that threw us off on September 28th. And so, basically, that's why we're here today.
So to be clear, the 80 includes the base, right?
That's correct.
So if you look at just the sign face, that's somewhere in the 60s, right?
Yeah, it's 6'6" is what it's gonna come out to in the height. And then it'll come out to 10 foot on the linear footage of the cabinet, I guess is what you wanna call it.
Okay.
And it'll be internally illuminated with LED white, which is what everybody wants nowadays, because it's green and serviceable will be 10 years from now instead of 3 years with fluorescent. And we included some landscape aspects based on some previous knowledge that I had, but again, I'm not an arborist, I'm not a landscaper. But we decided to throw something in there, but we will fit whatever the architect or the landscape submitted as part of their landscape submittals.
Right, and we're
Yeah.
good here that will be included.
That will be included, yes, and then we would include the address, because I did realize that most municipalities does require addressing on pole or monument signage.
Okay, all right. Thank you. That's what was approved
By city
by
council.
council? Okay. So y'all can see that that's the same color scheme, is it not?
Yes.
I mean, I want to get into this thing about colors again, the shades, but that is meant to be the same color.
Yes.
Yes.
But the difference, and I appreciate, Rick, you guys finding this, is I don't recall exactly, but I remember that there was modifications made on this sign where there wasn't so much red. And that's why we had the stripes. I remember stripes for some reason.
It used to go all the way down.
Also, we reversed this to white, so those will not be red, they'll be white.
KFC?
Yes, KFC. I think that was one of the points was brought up, part of the presentation. And we reversed color that, but this had to stay, but we were allowed to keep the Colonel's logo, but we took away all the lettering that was down here that's homemade fresh or whatever they utilize as part of the slogan. To just be the logo itself, but it'll be not illuminated, it'll be
Yeah, my-
actually applied to that canopy.
My recommendation, the original design that was presented, I think back in like August maybe, was actually had like red and white panels like marching down the building.
Oh, yeah,
And
the
that was
original
what
concept.
we felt like was just way too much.
So, remember, what we're looking at here now is that's what has been approved. We're talking about the monument sign that'll sit out on the road by the highway. That is 10 by 8, including the base, as proposed here. So the question for us is, or for you. This is an approval item, that no variance is required. The stipulation should be added that there's an address included. And then, we could have a motion with that, or if people do wish to talk about any color changes based on design standards, welcome to do so, but otherwise it is compliant with code, as staff has pointed out.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
it's a lot of red.
Is that going anywhere, that comment?
Well, I'm just saying, it's a
observation?
lot of red. I don't know, if,
I can recommend going back to the national franchisee, which is out of Arizona, and ask them if we can reverse like we did on the channel letters.
right?
Let's go back with white as the background, but again, it's gonna be more brightness. But still, we can go with the white, but we'll have to reverse the KFC now to be probably possibly black.
What happens to the kernel?
He stays red and black and white,
It'll all change.
But if that background behind him is white,
but we'll have the black outline.
won't have a blackout.
Yeah, we'll have to like shade it out and put like a black line. I mean, I know they might not be acceptable to it only because this is the kernel and this is the franchisee logo, the national branding. But I'm sure there's been other instances where color changes or schematics have come into play, especially on signage.
Though, keep in mind, you know, and I appreciate you're willing to work with the city on this. If you do, I know the concern about the red, but if that red were to be white, right? That's an internally lit sign, that is bright.
It's gonna be
It's
bright,
bright white. So I don't know that you really gain much
yeah,
from that.
yeah.
Is there any way to just internally light the kernel and KFC?
It
background?
could be, but it'd be quite expensive. We'll call that a cutout, probably a cutout channel letter on a backer panel, which will raise it to be like three-dimensional, and then it'll all be internal attached to what I call a backer panel. And then, but that backer panel will probably be solid or opaque. And that could be viable, but again, what color do we do that back panel? I mean, it could be white during the day, and at night it'll just be dark. And the only thing that would shine through would be the kernel himself as a logo. I mean, it's conceivable, yes, but it might be quite expensive to the consumer, that's all. I mean, on my end as being the manufacturer, so.
Right, it's doable is what you're
It's
saying.
doable, it's just that to convince them to pay for it, that's, I know economics usually is not
Right.
a right for a variance or an exception to the code, so.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Ron. It's a lot of red and it's big. 6 foot by 10 foot Colonel Sanders head.
I can ask if we can go with what we call a opaque vinyl application, that's the background, meaning it'll still be dark. But the other vinyl application portion of that, it's called a flex face or a plastic face, because we'll probably stretch it and put it on a frame. Meaning, so once it's not opaque at night, the only visibility of the light shining through would be the Colonel himself. So the background would basically just stay dark. But again, can that be read during the day? At night it'll be dark.
no, I think that, I mean, these are interesting proposals, and I think the color issue, I'm speaking for myself, but I think the color issue is most significant when you're talking about nighttime. I don't think red in the day is at all the same thing as red at night. You think about building down here with emergency on it, that really glows brightly. And you could say that's quite appropriate for that type of facility. But,
I can do that.
yeah,
I can do that by presenting it back to the owners, just stating the fact that based on your local municipality and your code aspects, without seeking the proper variance or a variance to the additional request, that we'd like to be in compliance with your local ordinances, and that we would just offer the facing to be opaque, the background, and then we'll make the kernel translucent. I'm just throwing that out.
Mr. Chairman,
what do you all think?
Like compromise.
Yeah, Joe?
I was going to say, what he just said, his comments there, I think are quite appropriate, and we could wait until the next meeting to make
Well,
a
we could approve something along those lines, or if it's preferable from your perspective, from the applicant's perspective, to just pull this
I'm
item.
like 99.9% sure I can convince the applicant to do such a thing.
Right.
And just so y'all know my history, I used to be the chief site inspector of the city of San Antonio for 19 years, before I went to the dark side and became a sign installer and a project manager. So I have a lot of history about variances and Board of Adjustments and city council requests. So based on my previous knowledge and my area of expertise, I can convince them, based on what your code reads and how it's outlined, that we have to adhere to these codes.
I think, Mr. Chair, the good thing about this item is it is meeting code, but it's just the red is that where there's a concern. So I think, I would have no problem recommending an approval for this if we can follow what our friend here is suggesting with the alteration of seeing if we can tone down the red with being creative on the way you position the lighting, the way you so eloquently phrased it. That would be what I would suggest, and I would be happy to recommend that approval if that's something that,
So at this point, I think we can take a motion.
yeah. I recommend a motion to,
So we gotta read through it, and it's an approval, not a recommendation, so, and remember about the street address as well.
right. I recommend,
No. Not recommend,
I make a motion to move,
approve.
to approve
There you
the request by Facility Solutions Organized Group for approval of a single-base business use monument sign pursuant to Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 66 Signs, Section 6649, Commercial Signs, Single Business Use, monument type for a Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant located near the intersection of Cedar Trail and SH 16, more particularly described as BCAD property 127, 47, 14, and CB 4477G, Bandera Oaks, Block 2, Lot 4, with the alteration of the red being opaque, and the street address being added to the sign,
to the base.
the
Is there a
base of the
second?
sign.
I'll second.
Were we gonna add the landscaping as well?
Well, I thought it was already.
I thought it
added,
was
so
there.
I think we're good, because they subsequently submitted it. Joe, you seconded it?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, so any further discussion, Mario, or,
I'd just like to thank the gentleman that's
That-
here tonight
that
for
Instead of saying that to the
the
sign to the base,
creative suggestions.
address,
Yeah.
street address to the
Add-
base.
add
Joe, anything
address
to add?
code.
Anything to add?
No, I have nothing else to add.
Anybody else?
Can you restate the motion?
So the
just I-
motion, sure, the motion is to approve the request by Facility Solutions Group for the single-use business monument sign for the Kentucky Fried Chicken Restaurant near Cedar Trail and State Highway 16, with the additions that the sign, that the sign base include the street address, and that the sign facing, the red sign facing be made opaque with the intent, and tell me if this conforms with what you mean, Mario, that at night it does not show red. In daytime it'll be red, in nighttime it won't be red, it'll be opaque. Well, that's the motion discussed, so all in favor of that motion, please signal aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion's approved, so it's an approval item. Thank you for being here, appreciate your input.
No, thank y'all for the time and effort, and Rick, I guess, do I give you a revised drawing by tomorrow for the city council presentation? Showing that all these elements are designed correctly?
Council doesn't need it,
The
They don't
sign-
need it?
The
Okay.
sign's been approved.
Okay, so we don't need to do any changes?
forget
to-
council.
You will need to do the changes and submit them to Ernest so that we have it for our files.
Do the permits. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you, sir.
That was item number 10. I'd like to propose that we reverse orders of numbers 12 and 11 tonight. There is not an urgency to the overlay discussion at this moment, but we have been talking about the sign ordinance for quite a while, and I think it's within the realm of possibility that we can get through it tonight and get it out of our hands and put it on to city council for their consideration. So I'd like to turn to number 12, and you probably ought to have can you have it available, the clean copy that you had done?
Yes.
And I think what I'd like to propose for this discussion is, in your packet, you had found another copy of, a clean copy, reflecting the revisions that the city administrator made based on discussions with this body, with city staff, with council and the mayor. It is, I think, identical to what we saw last time, with the exception of the definitions section at the end, which if you haven't looked at that, you should, because it's really a nice way to do it. Those graphical representations of different signs and sign types can be very helpful to applicants, to staff, to everyone, so kudos for that. And so what I'd like to do is just really walk through this. We've looked at this is either the third time that we're seeing a version like this.
That's
And
my review.
in hopes of, like I said, trying to move it on to council, I'd like to give everyone the opportunity to raise questions, point out suggested changes that can be incorporated into this document, with the hope that at the end of the discussion, we can craft a motion that would move this on to city council. I should say that Commissioner McLaughlin, who couldn't be here, had emailed a few points that he wanted to make, or questions to ask that I could bring up during the discussion. But at the outset here, why don't we just start going through this, and I would invite you, as we move through each page, if you see something or if you've noted something that you would like to question, please do call that to our attention.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mario?
at our last meeting, we all had homework and we all divided it up and we all had different sections. Has all that been incorporated now into this latest?
Some
version?
has, some has not. But I have notes from that, and I think you will see as you go through it that they largely are addressed. And is that fair to say, Rick?
Yeah, it's a lot, some of those comments were competing comments, so it wasn't.
Right.
So I tried to incorporate concerns from everybody in this, and I started with the document that I had presented at the last meeting.
Right.
And the chair is correct, the vast majority, there are some deletions in here, but I think the most significant change is the definition, so that pictures say 1,000 words, and so even if you don't get the definition 100% correct, you can say, your sign looks like this, and it's prohibited. So that was the only way that I could figure out to make a definitive yes or no if something
Sure.
is prohibited or not, so.
So what I'd like to do is I'd like to walk through, we're gonna work from what's in your packet, and we'll go page by page, and I'll ask for comments if there's any comments or questions. The section numbers largely match up with what you've seen before, so if you have another document you're looking at, potentially could assist you. So I will just open it up on page 1. And I should say, let me make one other comment. The vast majority of the changes in this document, not all, but the vast majority, are non-substantive. Cleaning up the document, fixing the prose, resolving formatting problems, stuff that is really detail-oriented. And so thank you for doing that, Rick, because I'm sure that took a lot of time. There are, of course, a number of places where there have been substantive changes, and we've talked about some of them. But I think for our purposes here, we really don't need to worry about the formatting and stylistic pieces, because those are pretty straightforward, and I think everybody would agree it makes for a cleaner, smoother document that will be more useful to everybody. So having said that, page 1, which starts with the title, purpose, scope, applicability, anything there anybody wants to comment on? Hearing nobody, I'll flip to page 2, which has the sections on liability, design review guidelines, code requirements, and at the bottom, starting exempted signage. And I have a couple I'd like to just call attention to or ask about. In 66-11A, this is under design review guidelines, making the point that the architectural review done by this body is what governs the design guidelines. Do we need, or would you be amenable, Rick, to adding into this the Old Town Helotes plan or guidelines, or do they deserve to be called out separately, would be my point.
I don't believe so, because in chapter 98, section 9872, where the sign code is for Old Town, it actually references in that document the Old Town Helotes plan that has all those design criteria in it. So we would only look at chapter 66 for every sign that's not in Old Town. We would look at chapter 98 for
Okay,
that.
perfect, that works.
Could I make a brief
Go
point
ahead.
about that, though? To that point, in my professional experience, we may want to mention that somewhere in the, right on the first page, just that there is an additional sign code. 'Cause I can see how someone like me would not pick up there's another sign code section. I'm fine with it being in Old Town. I mean, obviously, that makes more sense for it to be there, but if it were at least referenced in the sign section that there's an additional code section pertaining to this particular geographical area.
Which section would make sense?
I'm gonna,
to you?
it might
Section
even,
98
right up
for Old
front, I
Town.
would say, scope or
See section
jurisdiction.
98 for Old Town.
Yes, but I'm asking which section.
How about scope, Jason suggests perhaps 66-3?
Okay.
Great. Back on 66-11, letter B. Last point mentions commercial signage in here. Some of the signs, though, are residential. Does it bear inclusion of residential? We have residential entry signs and other miscellaneous type of signs that could be in residential areas.
I would just add commercial and residential
Yeah.
signage.
That works. Okay, turning to page 3, which has the exempted signs discussion, followed by location restrictions and prohibited signage. Any comments or questions there? I have a question on the exempted signs. We've had the ongoing discussion about works of fine art. Where do we anticipate in city code works of fine art will be addressed? If not the sign ordinance?
It doesn't.
Right now, it does not. There's nowhere else in code that addresses that.
That is correct.
Right. So do we anticipate that there will be further discussions or direction from council about having a way to regulate works of fine art?
I'll wait to hear from council on that. I don't. Yeah, I don't think that on the Spire Star, I don't think that the sign code is the place to do that, because technically they're
Right.
not signs. I think the building, chapter 18, the building code, or the zoning code with height restrictions would be the more appropriate place. And so. when
Where
it
did you
goes-
say? You said in zoning code?
Within chapter 98, they do have plate height restrictions for houses and for commercial. And I think it either belongs in chapter 18 or chapter 98.
So wouldn't it be good at the end of item 5 to see the code?
Well, we don't have a C anywhere yet, though, is the problem.
No, I'm saying that eventually, if we're gonna create that section of it, put it there, again, like Jason
Yeah,
had said about the other part, is that you should say, well, it's not regulated, and if you don't know to go to somewhere else to see that, then we could run into
Tell-
construction that is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand, the councilman makes a good point. The question that, the thing I would bring up is that we actually define fine art, though. And fine art means sculptures, fountains, or similar objects. I'm not quite sure that a spire or a tower would fall under fine art, just from a
So do we need to give it
From
its
a
own personal-
reasonableness perspective, I wouldn't consider that fine art.
What would we call that section?
Commissioner, I'm not there yet.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I recognize and agree with you that the sign ordinance may not be the place to deal with those type of structures.
Particularly since we're saying that they're not signs.
Right. But I think we don't, and that's why we keep coming back to it, because we've had issues with it. We don't want to see this not addressed. and this may not be the place, and that's fine, but, you know, we got councilmen sitting here who can sort of carry this back, saying, hey, this is something we need to get out in front of. Well, we can't get out in front of it, but, you know, catch up to it, so that we have something within the code that can regulate what people want to construct, whether it's part of a sign or not.
Well, what I'm just saying, but somewhere in here, just a reference line, these items are now under this. You know, so if someone grabs this, like Jason was saying, and goes through it, well, it's not here. But just so you could fall back and say, well, no, number 5, you know, directs you to where that would be covered.
What I would suggest then is under chapter 66-11 design review guidelines, or within the scope of this chapter, that we stipulate that tower elements are addressed in other parts of the municipal code of ordinances, but I don't know where yet, so it
Well,
would
yeah,
just
but,
say,
you know,
it would
just-
just reference, it would be in another section of code.
Right, yeah. Just so, yeah, like so Jason said, that when professional people go through it, oh, didn't see it. That, so just to avoid problems later on.
Well, then I would place it under scope.
Okay. Yeah, we just,
Such as towers and spires.
towers, statues, water slides.
Non-sign structural elements such as towers and spires.
Sculptures?
Well, no, he's got that defined as fine art, that wouldn't be regulated. And all you could say, what, addressed
Reference in-
elsewhere. Elsewhere in code.
Elsewhere in the code of
Yeah.
ordinances.
And that's, you know, I would think it doesn't need an act of council or us. When that happens, this is online, you just make it a hyperlink to wherever that is, you know,
Yes,
when that day comes.
yes.
Okay, back on page 3, is it? Anything else on page 3? Okay, page 4, which continues the discussion of prohibited signage and prohibited acts. On page 4, 31B, the last section before prohibited acts, it references a property without actually describing the property or identifying the property.
Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't, is that a question?
Yeah, so for signage to be displayed within the following property, what is the following property?
It's a nonprofit organization with combined land area of 40 or more acres of real property accessible from Leslie Road.
That's describing the property?
There's only one.
I know, but
Yeah, I mean, I could see where you're, it could say for signage to be displayed within, and then change that. Yeah,
Okay.
I can wordsmith that to make it clearer.
okay. But you don't actually, I understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah,
Without-
it's
without a-
basically trying to say the Festival Association without saying the Festival
Right.
Association.
You'll see a recommendation in there on that.
Okay.
Started section. Take out the first part and just start.
Anything else on this page? Page 5 then. Sign classifications and residential signage. 41 and 42, sorry. Okay, page 6, which is sections 66, 43, and 44, residential subdivision entry signage and banner and flag signage. Okay, this'll, my comment here, I'm sorry, Jeff, go ahead. You got something?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question here that a lot of these people seem to have a question about the base. On number 2, size, should you put something like surface area including base shall not exceed 145 square feet?
I would go to the definitions on that then, because I did change the definition of surface area. On page 27, it says surface area of a sign means the total square footage of a sign above average grade, including the sign face, frame, mounting hardware, and base. And I think the catch-all there is, means the total square footage of a sign above average grade. So that's basically everything.
Okay.
I would like to advocate for returning to this section and all the other ones, the item regarding design. We previously, or the current code has in it, I don't have the language right, but design, it basically says C66-11.
So you want all of the sign categories to reference 66-11 for design.
That would be my recommendation. So everyone's clear on this. What we currently say in the code currently says, has an item among those, height, number, location. There's one entitled design, and it simply says in accordance with criteria in section 66-11. And my thinking here is similar to what we've talked about earlier, is that it's a reminder to folks who just go to the section that they deem relevant for their particular sign, that there is in fact a design requirement. It's a reminder that that's there, and that they may miss it if they skip directly to their particular signage.
I think that's good.
So I think the sense, Rick, would be to just, for each classification, just throw that one back in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, because then you might wind up with a base that's that a, teal glazed brick instead of what we want is our traditional,
Teal glazed might look nice.
yeah.
Good.
A band of it.
On the same page, under banner and flag, and you brought this up last time, Rick, on duration for the banners, and I don't remember the discussion, but you had proposed increasing from 30 days to 60 days the duration of a,
I'm proposing
banner?
changing it from 30 calendar days every calendar quarter to just a blanket 60 calendar days. And the reason I'm doing that, number one, is for ease of
right?
implementation, but also because I still go back to the number is limited per lot. So it's really only one, we only allow one banner per lot on any commercial property unless it's in a multi-tenant center, and then we allow two.
Okay.
So the 30, I think it's very simple to say it should be easy to track 30 calendar days every calendar quarter, but it's not from an implementation perspective, because remember, when our code enforcement officer goes out there, he's only looking to see whether that sticker is on the back of the banner.
Yeah.
Okay, and our system doesn't spit out a report that says these are the ones that are expired. We have to physically go in and check it. So at the if y'all think 60 is too long, make it 30. I don't care. I just think this whole calendar quarter, trying to fit it in with that makes it complicated to enforce.
But
So-
60 implies one time 60 days, not 30 and then 15 and then 15.
It implies it can be up for 60 days.
Yeah.
Yeah,
From when they receive a permit,
That's
they
when
can
it starts,
they
yeah.
can have that permit or that banner
days
displayed
before
for
the flood.
60 days.
but that's it. So if they have a spring sale, they can put up a sign for 60 days. But can they reapply for a fall sign?
This would allow them to reapply, yes.
How much time in between?
But they are limited by the number that are allowed per lot.
Right, but, okay, we put up a sign, we keep it up for 60 days. At the end of the 60 days, do I walk in and just get another permit for 60 days?
You could, yes.
Okay, that's,
But you have to come in and pay for a permit.
right, I'm just,
It would be a new application, so
right, okay.
I like the 30 days per quarter thing. But one of my questions is on this whole banner and flag signage in 6631 prohibited signs, number 6, flag wave blade and teardrop banner signage are completely prohibited.
Correct.
So these flags are municipal,
So these banners, or these
state, federal.
banners saying fall sale or spring sale have to be a square banner.
They have to be within the definition of what a banner is, and so,
Picture.
yeah, so under banner, I added the picture there where it's a physical vinyl banner between two poles, means any temporary rectangular sign of lightweight fabric, vinyl, or similar material that generally is mounted between two poles or attached to a building at one or more edges and is used to identify a business name or activity or to advertise a special event. Except as specifically permitted herein, flag, wave, blade, teardrop, and similar banner types are prohibited. And the only reason I had to put except as specifically permitted herein is because of the exception for that property off of Leslie Road.
I guess I would be concerned with like a worst-case scenario where someone is perpetually going out of business and has one of these banner signs and just reapplies every 60 days and has it going out of business, you know, one of these, you know, like I think there's one out,
The
just
World
outside our
of
limit.
Decor, or whatever it is,
yeah,
that's always
yeah,
going
World
out of
Decor,
business.
yeah, where it's, you know,
I don't even know where that is, but it's going out of business all the time.
Auction.
You know, maybe even having a 20 days in between, so you can't be continuous. There's a 20-day,
We want to be mindful
that you
of,
make another
you know,
application.
of staff's enforcement piece,
yeah,
right?
well, yeah.
But I do think you get, maybe there's a sense up here that if you go back to what a banner's purpose is, to identify a business name or activity or to advertise a special event, you could make the argument that 30 days is a reasonable time for that type of thing. Perhaps we cap it at X number of days per year. Again, you're going back to that
well, the
quarter system
issue-
perhaps, I know you're trying to avoid that, but.
the issue was like they can't, it's like, it's presently 30 days per quarter, but then say they apply January 15th, they're allowed to have it till February 15th. I guess the problem is maybe they take it January 15th to January 31st, take it down for 2 weeks, put it back up. Is that the issue, or is it just that they can't?
Well, the whole thing with per calendar quarter, actually, you can have, under current code, it could, your 30 days could be up December 31st, but then you can immediately apply for another permit for that subsequent calendar quarter. So you can have it up for 60 days already. It is 30 days, correct? I think it is 30.
Currently 30.
Currently
30
changing
days.
to 60.
So you can have it up for 60 days if you do it right and pay, and do it at the end of a quarter and the beginning of a quarter.
Well,
That's why, that's the other reason I didn't think 60 days was excessive, because that's, a lot of people have figured that out.
Well, I'm just trying to wrap this up. How would we do it such that you guys could enforce it, but they can't just keep reapplying and having this thing in perpetuity?
You would have to add some language that the subsequent sign was substantially different than the previous approved banner. I mean, because then they would still be allowed to apply again, but the banner would come down and there would be a new banner in its place, as long as it was substantially different.
what do we accomplish to do that? I mean, are we
Nothing,
trying
because
to?
nothing really, because the issue is them putting up a banner, they're still putting up a banner, right?
Yeah. But we should have some kind of objective we're trying to achieve. And from what I understood you said a minute ago was about how you enforce it. So if it's not about enforcement, what other objective would be? Whether it's 30 days, whether it's 60 days, whether it's 90 days, whether it's quarterly, whether it's 6 months, what is the objective here?
Well, I mean, I think the objective of the commission would be to eliminate visual clutter along the road.
Okay. So by changing the sign too often would be more clutter?
Well, one of the commissioners suggested that they didn't want to have it to where the same person can come back and apply for a permit every 30 days or every 60 days and put the same banner up in its place. The only difference is, that means that the city is generating more revenue.
Yeah.
But I know that's
right,
not y'all's
yeah.
concern.
Well, it should pay for the administrative costs.
Sure.
But maybe I missed the point.
No, I think you raise a legitimate issue, and I think if you go back to the fact that a banner is defined as a temporary sign, that if you said 30 days a permit should be for 30 days, and the current language, which is 30 days once per quarter, I mean, perhaps you could say, you could leave it like that, or you could say 30 days renewable, up to 90 days total and 360 out of 365 days, something that allows people to do more than one. They might have 3 sales a year they want to advertise. That's not unreasonable.
Yeah.
Or you leave it as it is, which, spaces it out a little bit, which might accomplish that. But I think the key point is temporary. Right now, the code says you can have a banner for what amounts to 120 days. I suppose reasonable people can have different opinions about if that's temporary or not.
I guess, the simplest way was just to amend what the present language saying you wouldn't be allowed to reapply for the same sign, to put the same sign back up. There's some language that says that. If you applied again at the end of your 30 days or 60 days to put something else back up, it can't be the same sign.
But somehow you've got to be able to know all the different signs going up and that they're not repeated now, so.
Well, that's actually easier for us to enforce because they're submitting their application and we know what that sign generally looks like. So when they come back to get an additional sign permit, they're gonna have to fill out a form that says the sign has this language on it. And so, there aren't tons and tons of banners around town, so we're still a relatively small geographic area, so it's, let's put it this way, the code enforcement officer knows when a sign is permitted. It's harder, given the system that we currently have, to know if a sign is expired. Because the current definition says 30 days within another period of time. And that is not easy for a guy out in a truck to figure out if it's expired or not.
Yeah.
But he can know when it was permitted.
Yes.
So why don't we just say 30 days? The permit is for 30 days. I'm just playing with the language here. Renewable, or you, I don't want to say renewable because that implies the same exact sign. It doesn't have to be, but 30 days. And you may have banners for up to 90 days total per calendar year or per 365 days.
That's easy to enforce.
And I realize that saying it that way does create the possibility that somebody could have a going out of business sign banner for 90 straight days.
Well, I guess you might have somebody come in and say, well, I really need 100 days for this because of so-and-so and so-and-so. Then what do? We go to a variance system?
Or we just say no.
Well, but yes, you could always say no.
Well,
But
staff is not gonna say no. Staff is gonna
if,
tell them that
Right.
their option is a variance
Right.
request. Yeah.
But if we're trying to serve the public, with no good reason, why would you say no unless you have a real reason for it?
Well, I think the same basis that we said no to the gentleman tonight, who had his reasons,
Yeah.
which were very
yeah.
legitimate and
I
important to him,
understand, I
right?
understand, I understand.
Yeah,
We're trying to-
conceivably, there's a good reason
We're
for it.
trying to have
and
consistency, I would think.
in theory, but I think that, we have the right to say, well, you need to come before this board,
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
present that
absolutely.
good reason, and
Yes.
we'll approve
I
it or not.
I agree. We just need to have some sound logic or whatever it is.
So, where is it?
So under page 6, you wanna change it to 60 or 30 calendar days, renewable
I don't have the language, but
I know,
the
but
point
you
being, you
want
could
it-
have 30 and then another 30 and then another 30. It could be the same sign, they could be different signs. You could have 3 permits.
no business can have more than 90 days worth of
Right.
banner signage up.
Right.
Okay?
But we want to permit it on a 30-day basis.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Okay.
I mean, if you approve the concept tonight,
Yeah.
I'll change it before it goes to P and Z.
It would be
Or to
consecutive,
city council.
consecutive 90 days, it would be 30, like the next
It
day they
could.
go.
It
could
doesn't
go up.
have to be, but potentially it could.
But Rick, you're saying that what we have now, saying per quarter is not good because it's hard to police that. Is
Hard
that the whole argument here or the whole discussion
30
here?
days every calendar quarter is, it may sound simple, but it's not easy to enforce because you have to know, number one, when the permit was issued, you have to know when it expires, and you have to know what calendar quarter it's in. So it's not easy from an enforcement perspective, and it's not easy from a issuing a permit perspective because there are too many variables in there. So they have to go back and research what prior permit was issued. It's convoluted.
So it'd be easier this way with this modification.
30 days, a permit for 30 days with a total of 3 permits per year per business entity is easy to enforce.
Okay. All right.
Since it helps police also, we don't want a city or a town of banners. And I can tell you that I directly know from my work that the city of San Antonio only allows banners up at major, or at identified street intersections for 4 weeks, and that's it. And then the banner has to come down by that vendor or that company or that organization. It can't be up there consecutive. I'm just giving you a real-life example of what the city of San Antonio does from my work that I do. And I heard your comment earlier about, we don't want to clutter up the Helotes with banners everywhere, so we do want to have, I do like the 90-day, 3 times in a given calendar year. I think that's important. We don't want somebody to take advantage.
Is your situation, is that like an event or something?
Yeah, like,
a life walk or
like
something walk or-
school registration drives are happening now. There's a community festival coming, whatever it may be, Carnival, whatever it is. The city of San Antonio says you can have Kyle Seal in 1604, 4 weeks, period. That's it. Banner comes down after that. And then, and another vendor can go in there and put a banner at that intersection. It takes them a week. They do an install week is how they do it. So sometime during that Monday through Friday of that week, that old banner comes down and the new banner goes up for whoever that vendor is. But it can't be the same vendor, can't be the same company, can't be the same organization. Now that company or that organization that was at that Kyle Seal in 1604, they can go to Bandera and Braun. They could take their banner over there instead of putting it in a warehouse and storing it, if they still want to promote their cause or whatever it may be, their event. But it can't be at the same location.
Well, keep in mind that this is all private property that we're talking about, the signage. And if you're concerned about it, I mean, it's a reasonable thing to be concerned about. You could modify what we're talking about here to say something like, you couldn't have the same sign for 30 days and then renew the same sign for another 30 days. It has to be different.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be something you could do.
Yeah.
I guess when I was thinking about it, I was less concerned about that because keep in mind, somebody's gonna have to pay for another permit
Yeah.
to do it again.
Yes.
I don't know
The
how
process.
common that would be.
Right.
I think the bigger issue, and again, I'm speaking personally, is that you're limiting to 90 days, the amount of time that you can have a banner.
If it works for Rick and the team, I think it's fine.
I mean, that's something we could revisit too, this.
30, I mean, the number of days that you select is arbitrary. It's whatever the commission thinks is correct. So, the 30 days, you have a start and a stop. That's
Yeah.
easy. And each business is only allowed 3 permits per year. That's easy to enforce. We can pull all of that out of our Encode system instantaneously.
That makes sense.
Sounds good.
All right, let's, thank you. Let's press ahead here. Anything else on we were on page 6.
Mr.
Yep.
I just have
Those are
Question
on-premise,
about
those aren't
number 9.
off-premise. That's on
Which
Broadway Banks property.
section?
just right where we're at, 6644.
44, number 9. Okay, hang on a
Up
second.
to 150 square feet. I don't agree with that.
Not at the
I
list.
think that's
wait.
existing. 6644,
Number 9.
section 9.
Only allowed 90 days total.
I believe it's existing, so.
Special event.
They're only allowed 3 permits. though.
Maybe not. Rick, the question is, we're on 6644, number 9, special provisions.
I'm sorry, page 6, we're still on banners?
Yeah.
Okay.
Number 9, special provisions. Commissioner Wade asks about the rationale for the 150 feet square foot.
That is for Cornwall.
Oh, in front of the bank?
Yep, that sign that banner has always been humongous.
So we assume then that,
Off the bank there?
Yes.
yeah, so then we're assuming that the city administrator would use his or her judgment that 150 square foot banner probably is not.
I mean,
gonna be
we've never
appropriate anywhere.
authorized something more than,
Yeah,
up to 150 square feet,
It
except
it
for.
does have a disclaimer or an add-on where it's for large-scale special events.
fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, we've
Presumably it's
done
not
for
for
Carnival, we may have done for another large event, but it's very rare other than Carnival, which happens every year.
Page 7.
That seems it's large scale.
Page 7 continues with flags and then gives us temporary and site development signage. If there's any questions, comments?
Do we drop the size of flags? 40? Yeah, we did.
We did. Well, I mean, it's still in there.
It's 40, yeah. Yeah, I think we're, okay.
Page 8 continues temporary site development signage and then freestanding real estate signage.
Gonna leave that at 40? For a flag?
It was, yeah, I think we talked to, I think at one of them, it was like we boosted it up, but then we said no.
I think we left it.
We left it at 40. 5 by 8.
Page 8, nothing. Page 9 is the sections on political signage, and then we start the commercial signs with monuments. And I'd like to just bring up the issue on political signage that Mike McLaughlin had raised. This is section 6647, number 2. He asks that the language there, that the surface area shall not exceed 32 square feet. Is 32 square feet appropriate for a residential area? In other words, is that too big for residential areas? That's 8 by 4, basically?
Yeah, it's 4 by 8, and that's purposeful, because that's a typical,
Is that a typical,
banner. It's like a 4 by 8 sheet of plywood,
how,
and it's the, not cardboard, but the
about twice as
plastic,
big as that? Yeah.
whatever that plastic
Okay,
is. Yeah.
okay. Anything else on page 9? Page 10, these are all monument signage, single and multi-tenant monument signage. Yep, go ahead.
All right.
It's all right.
Mr. Chairman,
Going
go back
fast.
to the political signage?
Yep.
So, is this on private property?
Yes.
I can put up a 4 by 8 sheet in my front yard when elections are coming around?
Yes. You planning to?
Huh?
I'm just wondering if you're planning to.
No, I'm just questioning.
I
Yeah,
mean,
you can.
could we limit it? I mean, do we want to limit it? And, I mean, if it's a residential
Does it say how
zone-
many?
But I don't think you can,
You can't limit the number.
Oh, okay.
there's, for commercial versus other types of property, there's a free speech issue, but I think residential versus commercial zone is sort of a different animal because it's, everybody's kind of on the same playing field, you know what I mean?
Wouldn't HOA get involved?
When we have
A
HOA,
residential situation?
when HOA have their rules, the city applies, right?
They may have more
HOA rules
restrictive rules.
is overruled, they're not applicable.
That would be the police.
Yeah, the city doesn't enforce HOA restrictions, but the HOA can be stricter than we are, yes.
Like, so you can't, a church or a
If
commercial
the
business
city is
couldn't
stricter than
have any
HOA, the
different-
city doesn't overrule HOA?
Yeah.
Because when we wrote this in before, a few years ago,
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Hang on a second.
the city has
Sorry.
a rule that says it must be removed in 30 days. HOA says 60 days. Does the city enforce the 30 days?
The city then can enforce the 30 days because we're more restrictive, yes.
When we discussed this a few years ago, we voted to say the city would rule on that. You're saying they do, but they don't. You're saying they could, but they won't.
No, what I'm saying is whatever is, if the city is more restrictive in its ordinances, then we
Right.
can enforce those
Right,
within
right,
a subdivision in our city limits.
right, but you won't.
No, I'm not saying that. We enforce it all the time. We have
You do?
enforced things
Okay,
in private
okay,
subdivisions
okay.
all the time.
Okay,
Now, if the HOA is more restrictive than our city code,
yeah,
we will not enforce that. We will only enforce
I
up to our
understand.
city code.
I understand that, yeah. Okay.
We good on political signs? All right, page 10, anything on page 10 regarding monument signage? Okay, page 11, which is wall signage. Wall and projecting hanging wall signage.
I had noted that there was some language scratched out about window signs. Or it's not, like, I guess, signs inside of the window, is that we're not enforcing that in this part of the ordinance?
I thought we were, I think it's elsewhere.
Under section 66-51?
5.1, yeah, it's the next page,
Okay.
it's still there.
Window and doors.
All right, turn in the page, if you're good, to page 12, which brings us to window, door signage, and miscellaneous signage.
Okay.
With the window sign, and I don't think there's any substantive changes to the window signs.
I don't believe I changed really anything
We're
regarding
never
window
gonna do
signs.
anything with window signage ever again.
There wasn't like a maximum
We
number.
just redid that to 8 a
Yeah,
while
that's
ago.
why I didn't.
Yeah. So then we start the miscellaneous sign section on page 12. If you turn the page, if you're good with that, 13 will take us through menu boards,
Oh, you know what, I'm sorry.
canopies, that's all right.
Mr. Chairman, I had
Go back.
a question about the number.
Which
I'm
section?
sorry, back in the commercial window signs.
Window signs, number 8.
Number, maximum of 8 allowed. And I had a question about whether or not that applied to tenants in multi-tenant facilities.
Yeah, they would be allowed up, if, on their tenant space, they would be allowed up to 8 signs on the windows.
Okay, so each tenant would be allowed 8.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, everybody good? Next page, anything? Menu board signage down through canopy. I have a question on canopies, it actually goes on to the next page, but you referenced the size of 64 square feet. Has that been in the code? I don't remember that. And the 64, I guess my question really is 64 a standard canopy size? I have no sense.
The surface area of the signage on the canopy, and I put in parentheses, not the canopy itself. So the verbiage on the canopy can't be larger than 64 square feet.
So 8 by 8.
8 by 8, yes. Let me,
This is in the code now, isn't it? Is canopy covered?
no, I did change, if I recall correctly, I changed,
It is. It's 64.
it was 64 before, but 64 was not,
Oh, you didn't specify.
it didn't specify
Yeah.
whether we were talking about the canopy itself or the
Yeah.
wording on the
So
canopy.
you clarified that.
Yes.
Okay.
Increased it from 1 to 2 per lot.
Right, so instead of 1 per lot, and we're on to page 14, the very top. The current code says you can have 1.
Per
where'd it go?
street.
One per lot,
Destined way.
no more than 3. The total less than 64. So this is a fair trade-off.
But this is saying 2
You can have 2.
of
Per street.
per street,
Per street
up to 64 each.
each, correct. So 128 total instead of 64 total.
Correct.
Actually, it's one per street, isn't it? One sign per street or pedestrian way
Yes.
With a maximum.
with a maximum of 2. Okay.
Are you okay with that, Jeff? Okay. On page 14, it then goes into creative signage. I had a couple things here. On 52E, number 1, can you add in, Rick, reference planning and zoning? The very last line of number 1, upon approval of planning and zoning and city
Yeah, and
council.
y'all had mentioned that at the last meeting, I just
That's
negated
all
to
right.
put it in.
And then I wanted to restate the case to remove, to delete letter A right below that. And again, this is certainly, if people feel otherwise, that's fine. I just thought that it's just so vague and abstract and interpretive that I don't know that it really is helpful. Because we do say at the outset that this is meant to be creative, and that letter B talks about creatively designed signs, and I think, I don't know, I just think that trying to define it or give guidance on it is problematic. Are people okay with pulling that, or what do you think?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's kind of duplicate language. I guess you could eliminate just lump B into the.
B
item
could
one.
either be lumped into number 1 or kept separate, whichever is easiest.
Okay.
Down below 4A2, top of the next page is the same thing to pull out.
Okay.
And Mike, so I'm on the top of 15. What did Mike wanted to ask something? No, he didn't, I take that back. All right, anything on 15, which is more on creative signs plus garage sale signage. Page 16 is handheld sign and then non-conforming signage. Mike asks on this one, under handheld signs on page 16, what did he ask? Number 6, duration, maximum time period, 90 calendar days each quarter.
Oh, I didn't catch that. We've had so few of those, I would recommend changing it in the same way that we have the banners, so that it's 30 days up to 90,
Okay.
for consistency. I
That's fine.
didn't catch that when we went through this.
That's right, we don't have the gold shop anymore, do we?
No, I think that's the only one we've ever issued.
So it'll be, the duration will be
The exact
permitted for 30 days up to 90 days total per year.
Yes.
Okay. Are you allowed, I was reading through this one, up above where it says location, wasn't totally clear to me, like, are you allowed to, if there's no sidewalk, be in the right of way?
Says if a public sidewalk is present of the premise.
Oh, the last line, I guess, has to be behind the front of the property line, so you, but that seems to defeat the purpose, right? I mean, people want to be as close to the.
Shall be located on or behind the front property line. So it has to be on
It has to be on your
private property unless there is a sidewalk, and then it has to be behind the sidewalk.
I've never seen a handheld sign person on private property. They're always, I don't think I have. They're always in the public right away.
Well, I think the idea, I mean, this tries to prohibit handheld signs.
Yeah, I understand. Understand. Okay. Anything under non-conforming? I'm sorry, under let's see, Mike had something here somewhere, 51, B1.
I think he referenced C.
Yeah, top of page 17, letter C was a little just unclear, I think.
What it's trying to do is say a non-conforming sign that has been discontinued for a continuous period of 90 calendar days. Essentially, the business has gone out of business, or that the sign no longer functions as its intended purpose.
So it's not the sign that's been discontinued, it's the use or the business has ceased or changed.
Yes.
Christmas sale in March.
Got it.
I mean, I can reword it.
As long as you understand what it means.
I think actually the non-conforming sign language, I don't know this for a fact, but it references that VTCA Local Government Code 216. I think a lot of that language from non-conforming signs is probably verbatim out of
That's
Texas
fine.
code, because it's essentially, if you make somebody get rid of a non-conforming sign, state law requires the city to pay them for it. So in order, if we force them to take it down. So I would say that that's probably out of state law, but I can check it.
That's fine. I mean, I'm good with it. I think Michael just wanted to understand it. Right above that, it's actually in section A. Is it ever an issue, about removing a non-conforming sign if it falls down or whatever? Or if the cost of repairing is greater than 60% of the cost of a new sign? Is that ever an issue in terms of calculating that cost, or who determines that?
There is a process to calculate that cost, and it's by a committee that is formed by city council, and that's under state law.
Really?
That whole 60% thing is
We as a city formed that committee and done that?
it's an ad hoc committee as necessary, and I don't think so.
Never gone there. Huh,
I've not in my time.
curious. Okay. That's page 17. Page 18 is into the discussion regarding the administrative procedure.
Question on that? Very first way, A, general requirements. Unless otherwise prescribed by this chapter, it is unlawful for any person to erect, alter, or relocate any sign within the city of its ETJ without complying with the following requirements. So these people, like the ones we had on our docket tonight, that erect signs prior to doing anything at all, does the city fine them?
We have the option of issuing a warning so that they go before the proper channels, or issuing a citation. It is our policy, unless directed by the mayor or city council otherwise, to start with a warning. We're trying to be a business-friendly city, at the same time ensure that they are in compliance with code. So we give them a certain period of time to come in and do whatever they need to do to go through the process. So that's in there in case you have somebody who is stubborn, and we then give them a citation, and they go through municipal court.
I wonder, it wouldn't matter. I'm thinking, what if we duplicate that language right at the start? But that's of course assuming somebody actually looks at the thing. Your fair point, right? I mean, we've seen this happen where people come in and say, I didn't know I needed a permit for X, Y, and Z. I have a feeling those people aren't gonna see it wherever you put it.
Yeah, I deal with sign guys a lot, and the complaint that I hear from reputable guys, such as one or two of the gentlemen we had before us tonight, that there are other types of companies that make more the banner type, the plastic political signs, and they're not really, there's actually a licensing for sign companies in the state. And so, the bigger shops, are licensed sign vendors, and, kind of know that, before they even get started, they have to go look and see if there's a code that, pertains to it. Whereas these guys are more of a print shop. They don't, they're not licensed, they're not bonded, and they just kind of like, hey, what do you want? How many? Where do you want them put up? And that, I think that's kind of where.
And it's on the
you get
applicant,
into
it's not
these-
on them.
Yeah, that's kind of where you get, and realtors, I'm sure they don't look at, hey, I want to put up a sign on my property. I'm sure that's going to the code is not the first place that they're gonna think to look, It's the thing to do, so. Nature of the beast, I guess.
Okay, that was page 17. Anything on 18 or 19? 19 gets into the enforcement piece about what the city could do. Page 20 or page 21, which deal with variances.
Now, I will say that the enforcement aspect on page 19.
Yep.
First off, none of this code has been reviewed by the city attorney. As you know,
Sure.
I try to go through this process, see what y'all want, and before it goes to council, I have the city attorney review it and redline it. The enforcement provisions were strengthened considerably in here, in the sense that there is no mailing requirement. There's no, before you had to issue a letter to them telling them to remove the sign. They had a certain period amount of time to remove the sign. Basically, I made it to where if after a warning is issued, the code enforcement officer can go and remove the sign. So this section may be amended slightly based upon the city attorney's review, but I was trying to give our code enforcement
Sure.
authority more authority to enforce the sign code without going through a protracted certified mailing process that is really just ridiculous, if you ask me.
Okay.
The attorney will figure out trespassing and all that.
Yeah, I'm sure that there will be some changes to this before it goes to council, but I just,
And that really doesn't have to bear on what we do
no.
at all, so. 20 or 21? '22. You'll note on 22 in the P and Z section, it's where the language is that we've utilized in the past to, of our own accord, allow a 25% increase.
No, I did modify that
surface area.
to include not only the sign surface area now, but also the height and the monument base.
Yep.
Because we've had those instances come up before where, you know, y'all were okay with increasing the height slightly if they did something else, and so I added that. I don't know whether council will have an issue with that, but that is included in there.
And that does it, except for the definition section, which I would allow you to peruse on your own. I don't think we need to question that.
In the definition section, there were deletions, and basically what I did is the code that I proposed here, if the word wasn't referenced in the code, I deleted it from the definitions, because there's no point in having it.
Such as, like, what's an example of one, if you remember?
I'd have to go through and look,
All
but
right.
there were several of those.
Actually, wait, there's
I actually had a couple, Mr. Chairman.
all right, please.
I guess the first was canopy sign, and I wondered, kind of reading through the definition, did that pertain also to gas station canopies? This is kind of the intent.
This is on page
Page
23.
23, yeah.
Plastic or metal?
I kind of wasn't sure. I was kind of thinking about that when I read that definition. I was like, I wonder if that, when a gas station goes up, what is that, you know, like that, the shell right down here, it's got a shell on that, you know, where does that fall under the code?
There is, the only section of the code that applies to gas stations outright is the,
Under miscellaneous signs.
the service station price unit, per unit signage under 66-52. So if you go to miscellaneous signs on page 12, the first section applies to gas stations as you would typically see them. Now, that's really requires them to be on a monument base, but that canopy provision, yes, that would apply to
Canopy.
to the canopy. So basically, what you're doing is typically you're gonna have a gas station on, that fronts two roads. Very rarely is it gonna be just in the middle, so they would be allowed up to the.
Two maximum.
The two maximum plus the, whatever it was, 64 times 2, 128
Okay.
square feet. Now, if they needed additional, then they would have to go through the variance process.
Yeah, one or two more here. Tenant sign. Master sign plan. Would master sign plan, would that include things like directories or directional signs? I think we talked a little bit about directional signs.
It could. Typically, a master sign plan is really only presented, submitted for wall signage on a multi-tenant shopping center. But it could, so that, I mean, you can do a master sign plan for anything, the idea there is so that the applicant doesn't have to come back for every sign, just as long as it meets.
Yeah,
certain-
I think the one, where I was getting concerned about was that we saw at least one where they were trying to do a directional sign, which was a little more than a directional sign, and it seemed like that, if you're trying to do something like that, they should have a sign plan to say, hey, I got a couple different things going on here, I want to do a couple different signs, but that they kind of need to be, it's one thing if it's an arrow saying, go here, but another thing if they're trying to put their logo and stuff on it.
And, okay, Commissioner, are you suggesting that you want to include language that a master sign plan has to be for in addition to wall signs, pedestrian or
Yeah.
directional signage?
Yeah, directional signage.
Okay, I can add that.
And then, last thing was, the monument and pole signs. And some of my own personal kind of feelings and pet peeves about these, but, one of the things, we've had a couple signs that have fallen under the monument sign, definition, where they're kind of a wedge-shaped sign as opposed to a flat sign, they're sort of triangular shaped, where two sides are visible from the right-of-way. I'm not particularly fond of those. I don't know if we, necessarily need to put the kibosh on them completely, but one thing that concerned me a little bit was that the area, when you put up a flat monument sign and say it's 80 square feet, you only see 80 square feet from any one, nobody sees more than 80 square feet of sign. But when you do like a 45-degree triangle and both sides are 80 square feet, and you're looking at it from a 45-degree angle, now you're seeing a sign that's quite a bit larger than 80 square feet. If you catch my meaning.
On a monument base.
Yeah, so,
yeah.
so let's say if this is your sign, you're driving down the street and this is what you see, an 80 square foot sign. But if you see this, suddenly you're at a much larger sign than 80 square feet. Depending, if obviously you're coming at it from this way, but you know what I mean? Like when you start to, it just starts to get, I can see how somebody really maxing it out, especially if they tried to get, get our 25% increase. They could conceivably get.
But your total square footage is still 84 square feet. So if you're gonna split it, you would have to add this plus this.
Yeah, but I don't think it's what I think our 80 square feet is per side. Basically, you're allowed to have 80 square feet per, you know what I mean? Like you have a flat sign, you put a logo on this side, you put a logo on this side.
Right.
No matter which way you're looking at, no matter where you're standing, you're seeing 80 square feet of sign. You go around the other side of the sign, look at it, and you see the same thing.
You're cheating with the 45.
Yeah,
You're getting double.
or at least,
But you're seeing the
one
same
and a
sign
third.
twice.
Right, but you can see it from farther away.
So you can have a drink and do the same thing with a flat one.
I mean, I understand your point.
Yeah.
I would think, from my perspective, I can add language to clarify that, but I didn't do that because I'm thinking that if you have a flat sign,
Yeah.
That whole thing, regardless of the fact that we know it has two sides, is still that square footage.
Right.
But when you split them,
Yeah,
you're actually creating more surface
right,
area.
but that's not how we haven't been enforcing it that way. We've been enforcing it as when you split it, it's still 80 square feet, you know, per leaf.
Well, but that's a commission and a council,
Yeah,
that's y'all's that's your prerogative as to how y'all want, because that sign that you're referring to had to go through a variance process to here and council.
yeah.
So, I can clarify that in the language, but clarifying the language is still not gonna prevent that from happening
Yeah,
if somebody
yeah.
wants to
A
go through the
variance
variance
situation,
process.
Yeah, I understand that, I understand that.
I'll figure out some way to say that.
And then, pole sign,
Yeah,
I think they can get very ugly very quick. On the other hand, I don't have a huge problem with it if it's got a base on it and it's got some sort of poles involved. To me, I don't know that it necessarily needs to be completely solid. I like having the base. I think that, you know, is both an important feature from Helotis's sort of, you know, aesthetic standpoint, and I think it also just functionally, it kind of keeps the weeds down a little bit around the sign in conjunction with landscape ordinance, which adds a lot, but I don't know that I need, you know, I don't know how everybody else on the feels, so I don't necessarily need it to be completely solid, as long as it's got a solid base and,
I think the consensus has been no to that.
Yeah.
Not that a pole sign, however you dress it up, is still a pole sign. And in fact, sort of piggybacking on that if I can, if you go back to page 24 on freestanding sign, based on what we've done, and tonight was a good example, we asked that a sign be fully enclosed or encased, if you will, so it not be just two poles put into a base. And so I raised the issue of, if you look at the definition of freestanding sign, if we need to modify it, so that if you read the definition, starting where it says, but does not have a solid, just taking that out, because it seems like the consensus has been that we're not gonna approve it unless it is solid. So why lead them to believe that that would be acceptable?
Good point. Excellent point.
Yeah, but even though, we have the language in here that don't we have freestanding as a prohibited sign?
I was gonna say, yeah.
It's still
that's exactly
prohibited.
Right.
But people don't interpret that as prohibited because doesn't matter what I'm trying to say is, people will come in and say, well, it's in a base, therefore it's a monument sign. Two poles into a
Well,
base.
I would actually not
I don't know
delete
how-
that wording, but I would add to it. I understand, yes. If you go to monument sign on page 26, it says, the entire bottom width of the sign, face, framing, and mounting hardware is placed on or incorporated into a solid monument base. So whereas the freestanding sign definition just says, but does not have a solid masonry monument base consisting of brick, rock, or the like, incorporate that portion of the monument sign
Into the freestanding.
into the
one.
freestanding, and then you say, it does not have.
It doesn't have this.
Type of, it's not built this way. You see what I'm saying?
No open spaces, basically?
No, basically you're saying you can't have any open space. You've said it under freestanding and you've said it under monument.
And you say in the code that freestanding is not allowed.
It's prohibited.
Do you think that's enforceable? I mean, it's enforceable, but do you think that's because we've seen a number of these. This has not been atypical. Like the Honey Homes one tonight was a good example. It wasn't an unattractive sign, but it was really two poles.
I mean, do I think it's
Put into a
enforceable?
base.
Yeah, it's easy to enforce.
Should it be enforceable? Should it be something we want to do? I mean, that's the question.
Well, I think that was the commissioner's point, is that he
Yeah.
likes those types of signs, depending on what they look like.
yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's my own personal opinion. I can see where the problem is. A pole sign, you know, one or two poles, somebody takes
Yeah.
2-inch steel pipe and shoves it in the ground. Yeah. That's what we're trying to avoid,
Correct.
right? we sort of cleared that hurdle with the base. I mean, you know, I'm fine if the commission and city council just want solid signs, you know, that's, you know, the will of all of us, and that's fine. I'm just kind of throwing that out there as, you know, if we have a solid base, you know, to me, it isn't a pole sign in the strictest sense. It's, you know, you've already built it up more than that. It's, you know, and, you know, in terms of the material, I mean, we kind of cover that a little bit too with code in terms of, you know, not being just a, you know, unpainted steel pipe or PVC or something. You know, we can nip that in the bud pretty quick. Just throwing that out there.
The history of it is very long.
All right, well, let it go.
So
Yeah, under monument sign, it says it has to be the full width of the sign framing.
we have, I don't, by my count, Rick, there's maybe 8 or 10 modifications that we just made. And rather than, again, I think this can wait a month to finalize it, if that's all right with you. I mean, I personally would feel better seeing this one more time, but maybe if it's, to keep it streamlined, at the next meeting, could you, just think of the easiest way to do it, clearly highlight only these changes?
Yeah.
So that people could easily skim through this and find that,
I'll just highlight them in yellow.
yeah, I mean, there'll be 8 or 10 or 12 of these things that they're all pretty minor, but we can see exactly what's new, and then we can, so we won't get it done tonight, but I think it's a big enough
We're
thing,
close.
that good looking at it, and then send it on over to council for it to work on. And then next month, we can also, because this hopefully will be very quick next month, just verifying it and then putting a motion together, and then we can go back and bring back to the next meeting, the overlay district, and work that into the discussion. Sound like a plan? Okay, well, we don't need action on this, but we do have one final motion, Ron.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a motion to adjourn?
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, signal aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned at 9:19. Thank you all.